Welcome to Brainworms and Tangents. My name's Carissa,
And I'm Pamela.
and we're two 20-somethings with ADHD on a quest to chase the impulsive ideas we can't shake. This is a self-growth podcast all about becoming who you want to be, one brainworm at a time.
So, Carissa, I hear you have a brainworm.
Yes, habit tracking, trying all of the things to figure out what actually makes a habit stick.
I feel like this is always a topic with ADHD is how do you actually stick to a habit? How do you make consistent change? And it feels like everyone's looking for like the secret key that will unlock the ability to do something continuously over time. So I think this is
Yeah.
a great topic for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of us can attest to the fact that just by making habit trackers does not instantly give you the motivation and drive to actually accomplish the things you set out to do. It is a lot of effort and work than just deciding you want to start tracking your habits.
Was personally interested in doing this because coming off of our 75 hard challenge, it felt like we were building up these habits and we are doing them consistently or semi consistently. And I wanted a way that continue past the short spurt of the 75 hard. So, how can we translate one of our little challenges into long term change?
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start too. I think since ending the 75 hard challenge, are there any things that you've continuously done? I think that's kind of like Andy Frisella's point is that you kind of keep up with it, but it is quite the tedious task to just do, 75 hard for life.
There isn't anything that I have consistently done every single day
Mhm,
since the challenge. Probably the most consistent one is going to the gym, but just once a day.
mhm,
But even that has fallen off a good bit. I am going more than I did when I started the challenge, but that has been something that has been difficult for me is figuring out how to make those habits stick the way they did during the challenge.
mhm.
But like I said, I am still doing them more consistently. Like I am drinking more water than I did before 75 hard. I'm going on more walks than I did. But it's definitely not 75 hard level.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there are some things that I am trying to do, but not to the same level. I think thinking about reading and going on walks, but it's hard because it's also summer, so it's easier to get outside and do some of those things. But yeah, I don't think anything has really stuck since finishing 75 hard.
But you read Atomic Habits, right, by James Clear. What does he tell us about how to make habits stick?
It has a very clear cut plan. So if you haven't read Atomic Habits, I would highly recommend it if you are a person that struggles with forming habits and you don't really know where to begin. I think it gives you a really nice foundation of how habits are formed, the science behind them, and then how to actually put all of that into action. I mentioned this on a previous episode, but a lot of his things is to make it obvious and then make it attractive. And he kind of goes into that. And then on his website, he actually has a very specific post all about habit trackers. And he actually sells a book that has habit trackers and like a journal if you want to purchase that. Go by any means. But for this, we made our own. I think a lot of what he talks about is that by having a habit tracker, it allows you to sometimes visually see it every day. And I think by doing that, it reminds you, oh, hey, there's this thing that I'm trying to do every day. It motivates you to do better than like the day before. And he also says that it will provide you like immediate satisfaction by either checking off a box and like visually seeing that progress of, oh, wow, I've had this streak going for, this much time. And it's almost kind of like gamification in a way. I think that's kind of like at its simplest form of just seeing I've done these things X amount of days in a row. I don't know how the human brain works that way, but that is kind of the 3 benefits that he talks about having a habit tracker and how that can really push you forward in making and forming those habits.
Yeah, I feel like his methods are ADHD friendly because I feel like I've seen some controversy over that where people say he isn't ADHD friendly. But what you're describing, like the gamification of habit tracking, does feel like it's more geared towards people with ADHD.
I actually do think he can be more ADHD friendly than some other books, and like the 75 Hard Challenge, for example. One of the things he talks about is called the 2-minute rule, which encourages you to scale down your habits until they can take 2 minutes or less to do.
Mm.
That way, I think sometimes with ADHD, sometimes you hear, okay, just do the dishes, just clean one dish in the sink.
The hardest part is starting.
Yeah. So a lot of what he talks about is that and being able to not have these very mountain tasks, but just to take the first step. So some of the things that he recommends you putting into your habit tracker is to like read one page, stretch for 1 minute, and some like small things. And I think it's even worth just doing the things sometimes that you're already going to do. So like, if you want to keep track of, like, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, flossing, some of those, like, hygiene things that I think people with ADHD sometimes can struggle with, but by giving yourself a star or a check mark, I think it can encourage some of those healthy habits, but I think with ADHD, we dream sometimes way too big, so
Mhm.
scaling those things down is something I think that can help us and remind us it doesn't have to always be this big giant project. It can be reading one page in my book because I'll probably want to read two, and it kind of can go on from there.
Yeah, I think that relates a lot to the book Meditations for Mortals that we read by
Mhm,
Oliver Berkman, where he talks about a kayak versus a super yacht. Where if you need to paddle down the river, reality, all you need is a kayak, and it's much more attainable and realistic to get a kayak. But when people are thinking about, oh, I want to get across the river, they're like, well, I want a super yacht. And you just start, like you said, dreaming really
mhm,
big, but then you kind of sabotage yourself because you are giving yourself a goal that is much too large to complete, whereas
mhm,
you have to start with something that is realistic and attainable.
mhm. Yeah, I think that is kind of it was mentioned in Atomic Habits how we have like this all or nothing approach with habits. It's either, I'm gonna run a marathon or I'm not gonna run.
Mhm.
Like it's we have to go all the way. And I think, like you said, like maybe I don't need to do that. Maybe I just need to stay consistent with something and then go from there. But you don't have to pick the like hardest, most difficult path just to like prove something to yourself.
Sometimes other people's voices too. Like, I personally have been training for a 5K for who knows how long. And I've heard several times, like, you don't train for a 5K, you just run a 5K. Like, that is, and for some people, that's true. Some people were born being able to run a 5K, and I'm so happy for them. But in reality, like, that is my first step. My first step is to run a 5K. And
Mhm.
I can't be talking about how I'm going to run a marathon because I'm not going to unless I run that 5K first.
Yeah, I think it's important to have limits and also to know what you can and can't do. Like what's actually pushing yourself and what's just really unrealistic. And I think I thought about that a lot during this trial period. And another thing James Clear mentioned is in his book is you get feedback on your habits while you're actively doing them. So maybe the things that you thought you wanted to do, if you're doing it for 30 days, you're like, okay, well, I haven't checked this off nearly half the time. Maybe it's not an actual goal of mine.
Mhm.
So it lets you reevaluate what you're doing while you're doing it and also like how it's working and how it's fitting into your life.
Yeah, that's a really good point because if you really want something, you have to do it. And if
Mhm.
you are not capable of doing something, there's no point in beating yourself up constantly over
Mhm.
not being something or doing something when clearly it doesn't fit in your life, and maybe your goal can be something different, would be just as satisfied or rethinking what that outcome is.
And I think with ADHD especially, I know I constantly can beat myself up if you're, trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's like maybe you're just not going to be a person that drinks a gallon of water a day, like in that grandiose way of thinking. But it's okay for something not to work and then you can move on. But I think so often we get hung up on, well, why can't it work? And it's like, okay, well, if I'm not enjoying it and clearly isn't working, then that's okay. We have to kind of move forward from that. But it can be a struggle and it can be hard. And I think that's where trying to do the habit tracker is more so, like you said, a trial to see what works, what doesn't work, and how do these things actually work with the life that we currently have.
So, when you think of the word habit, how do you define it? Because as someone with ADHD, I once heard someone define it that for neurotypical people or people who have habits stick really well for them, a habit is something that they will just do unconsciously.
Mhm.
And for me, I don't think there's almost anything that I will do unconsciously except, like,
Yeah.
scroll on my phone. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's the only true habit that I have formed because everything else in my life really is a choice
Mhm.
to engage in each thing, and I think that's what can make habits so difficult for people with ADHD is because it's like having a really, really long to-do list, whereas for other
Mhm.
people, it's autopilot, so it doesn't feel like they have a long to-do list, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. I think it is it's funny when I talk to other people that I know clearly have their life together, and it's like there are things that they can't go on without their day without doing, or they, like, have such a set routine that if something is thrown off, they, like, can't function, whereas I'm like, every single day is different for me. I do not wake up at the same time every day. I don't eat the same foods. I don't there's not anything I do consistently every single day. And
Yeah.
it's so wild that someone does have that. They have the same breakfast. They wake up at the same time. They have their steps and that is like their morning routine. And I'm like, yeah, I just kind of see what happens. I might hit snooze, I might not. But it's such a wild concept that someone like I know like and every person with ADHD is very different because I know like you have more of a set like routine than I do, but it's still every day. We'll see what happens.
Where you and I differ in our ADHD is do you know the spoon theory?
I do not know the spoon theory.
Okay. This is really interesting. So, and I hopefully I'm not misquoting it. So, really what the spoon theory is the idea that everyone has a set amount of spoons each day. And maybe that can change based off of how much sleep you got or your environment and things like that. But the spoons basically symbolize your mental and physical energy that you have each day. And different tasks may use different amounts of spoons. Once you've exhausted all your spoons, out of energy and it's extremely difficult and or impossible to do anything else.
Huh.
So, I think where you and I kind of differ, Carissa, is I have found ways to increase my spoons every day and it is through different experiments like you and I do, and just
Yeah.
really testing my discipline and really trying to develop more energy that I have gotten myself more spoons every day to
Mhm.
be able to complete more things. But I think what's still the same for you and I is I still don't have like innate habits for
Mhm.
myself. So the only reason that I have more of a routine than you do is because I use a lot more of my spoons on doing each thing in my routine as like a checklist, which is kind of like what I was talking about earlier is none of what I do every morning is automatic. I have to choose every single thing that
Mhm.
I do. And it's funny because if I don't have the spoons or the spoons are going elsewhere on like elsewhere in the day, sometimes I'll get to like noon and I'll be like, I'm so tired. Why am I so tired? I'll be like, oh, I didn't have coffee today. Even though that's like such like a simple thing, but
Yeah.
I forgot to do it because
Mhm.
it's not a habit. I did
Uh,
something that's enjoyable. Like having a cup of
mhm.
coffee in the morning is enjoyable, but
Yeah.
I have to choose to do each of my habits, which is
Mhm.
exhausting.
It's funny. So there's this quote. It's not by James Clear, but he mentions it in his book. It says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And he loops that in with like habit tracking and kind of like you mentioned how some people go on autopilot and they are able to just do all of those things and like what is a habit, what isn't a habit. But it's a very interesting quote that I've kind of just like sat with when thinking about this episode and like what does it really mean and how does that kind of fit into what we're talking about?
Yeah, it makes me think of the purpose of this podcast
Mhm.
of not sitting idly by and just saying, I wish that my life was this way, or I wish that I could do these things, or things always seemed cool to me, but then not doing anything about it. It's yeah, that we have agency and like this
Mhm.
world is yours to live in. So I think that's really cool because you're right. Like if you're just always on autopilot, you're just waiting for things to happen to you or just you're unconscious to lead you towards the places you want to go, you're not taking hold of your life. You're not being
Mhm.
human and making the most of this life that you have.
It is such a very fascinating concept, and I think it's been a trend also with people of just like it's not waiting for the perfect moment to do something, just doing it anyways. It kind of falls it's kinda different, like, the motivation side is, like, the, like, do it scared, do it upset, like, just do it lazy, and then you have the I've been seeing kind of more on, like, body positive side of, like, social media where it's like, "Okay, well, don't wait until your body is how you want it to wear the bikini." It's like, "Okay, wear the bikini, who cares?" Like, it's just, like, different things like that where it's like you need to don't wait for the perfect time, but also, like, we are living our life now and you have to like make choices even if the circumstances might not be exactly because if you keep waiting you're probably never going to do the things that you want to do. I like that we are kind of pushing ourselves sometimes out of our comfort zone or saying if we've always wanted to do this why not just try and see what happens.
That makes me think of this idea that not making a choice and or not doing something is an action that is a choice. If you're
Mhm.
choosing not to do something because you're waiting for the perfect moment, you've chosen not to do something.
This is a whole tangent in itself, but have you heard the things about how free will doesn't exist? How, like,
Is this
nothing
going to
is
make me
actually
spiral?
I mean, probably. I someone I work with was reading a book and it was talking about free will. So I, like, picked it up and read the back, and it's this whole theory about how we don't actually have free will and how everything in our life is either determined or influenced by something else.
Mhm.
And I was like, "This is a lot." So I would love it one day to dive into the, like, free will doesn't exist theory and what people have to say about that, but it is a very interesting rabbit hole that we don't have to get down to today.
Yeah, that reminds me of this study from one of my psychology classes that I'm not remembering, but it was about priming. It was a study where they were able to get two groups of people to come to the same conclusions and come to the same outcomes just by flashing or by exposing them to images that they weren't consciously aware of. But when to the outcome of the experiment, these two groups independently came to the same ideas and conclusions, thinking it was totally like their own unique idea.
Mhm,
But in reality, the experimenters were the ones who were controlling it all along, which, like what you're talking about, where, these people thought they had free will. They thought they were coming up with an idea, coming up with something new, but really it was just what the experimenters wanted them to say at the end.
I think in a world where there's so much stuff being pushed on to like our society, whether that's through social media, advertisements, branding, it's like a hard time to have an original idea. I think there's definitely like moments in my life where I am like spontaneous, where I'm driving, I think I'm gonna go get gas, and I'm like, it's a nice day. Let's go to the beach instead. Like, there are moments like that where you are not planning to do what you think you're doing, but maybe I made that choice because I had just watched a movie or read a book or things like that. And I think the idea part of it is very interesting. I mean, there's so much like subliminal messaging in everything that we do ever. The foods we consume, the activities we do, the jobs we have. It is can be overwhelming at times, but I think that's like an unconscious thing we don't know is actually influencing how we live our lives. So, as we approached our habit tracking, you and I both went at it different ways, which I think is fun in doing any kind of experiment. I went the trendy route from a photo I saw on Pinterest and a TikTok, and I did a physical habit tracker with watercolor and with these sticker, star shaped stickers that I've had for like 3 years. And I've just been waiting to do this. I think I wanted to start this years ago. But so I think at the same time, you and I kind of both sat down and figured out what we were going to track, and we waited to reveal what we were going to our habits until we got to the podcast. So yeah, Pam and I worked on this together. I got out my watercoloring kit, and it was kind of fun just to paint lines. It was fun because they're very imperfect. Some of the stars don't fit. The lines are not straight, but I didn't care. So that was fun just to be creative. So if you want to do something, just painting lines, it was a lot of fun. And I hung this right next to my light switch outside of my bedroom so I would see it every day. And mine, it spanned 14 days. So that was kind of how much room I had on the tracker. So the habits I chose to track were drinking 64 ounces of water, 30 minutes of reading, going to the gym, ending the day with a clean, empty sink, 15 minutes of tidying, journaling, working on the podcast, doing my skincare, and making my bed. So those were the 9 habits I chose to track. What was your process?
So I decided I would try and do something digital, trying to see if we can do something ADHD friendly. Like, your phone's always with you, makes it a little bit easier to keep track of it, to see it all the time. So went with something on my phone, and immediately I regretted it
Yeah.
because I couldn't find like a good app for it. It was just, they were either too much or not enough. But eventually found one called Habit, and I could only do 6 habits on it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I had to upgrade to premium. And the habits that I decided that I would do were 10,000 steps a day, a 45-minute workout, drinking 70 ounces of water a day, tracking my calories, journaling. I think that's 6 habits. So those are my habits. And there was some other ones that I wanted to include, but it didn't fit on my free 6 habits. So I used my Fable app as my tracker for reading every day. I figure that would work
Hmm.
as also a way to track it. So immediately it ran into issues because it was trying to automate some of my habit tracking, which I did want it to do, where I wanted it to sync with my Apple Health. Again, trying to just make things easier for me to see and visualize, try to see like if automations can help people with ADHD
Hmm.
track habits. But it was too complicated. Like sometimes it would count workouts longer than they were or like not count them, and it was a whole mess. Or if I accidentally hit water, then it would like copy to Apple Health and then I couldn't undo it. It was a whole
Mhm.
thing. So I ended up being like, it all has to be manual in order for me to do it.
Yeah. We talked about this, I believe, on our 75 Hard episode when we were looking for a water tracker and
Mhm.
just the different hoops you have to jump in if you want to create your own quantity of water. Whenever you tap, you have to pay. So the paywalls behind just trying to track your habits is just so fascinating to me. How much money goes into preying on people that can't keep habits. I think people in the ADHD community spend so much money paying for these apps because that kind of belief that if I have something, then I'll do better. I definitely think it helps, but I think oftentimes we pay for things and then forget they exist, and it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. So it's very interesting that you had that experience.
Yeah, and I think going through my little experiment of doing my habits, honestly, I did not stick with it. I was not doing a good job of checking it. And I think what might be more beneficial for someone with ADHD is making it so different that it does stand out. And like what we talked about with the Delete Your Maps app episode
Mhm.
is the idea of making something harder so that it's novel and
Mhm.
you have to think more about it in order to form a habit or to get better at something. Because I think something being on my phone is too integrated with everything that is already an automatic process for me that I'm not
Mhm.
intentionally engaging with it, which is kind of like your James Clear quote about if you like by just shoving it in the things that I do unconsciously, it makes it so I'm not doing a conscious habit, which the goal here is to do something different. So
Mhm.
why not do something different? So I don't
Yeah.
think the digital tracker was a good idea for me at all.
Yeah. I think the visual cue is the most important thing, and that's, like, the main thing when you're learning about habits is the cue, and I think even thinking about 75 Hard Challenge, when people are doing that, they do so much prep work. You see them line their bedroom wall with sticky notes counting down 75 days, and it's like, you can't wake up and forget, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing 75 Hard today," because there's so many things around you that is, like, screaming, "Hey, we're doing this thing." And I think sometimes with ADHD, sometimes things can blend into the background. I know when I was in college, I made my lock screen on my phone a picture that said, "Take your vitamins." And it worked for like the first few days. And then it just became something I saw and I immediately like bypassed and I forgot, oh yeah, this is here to remind me. So sometimes even having something literally in your face isn't going to work either. So it's really hard to find that in between of what's actually gonna work and remind me to do the things I said I wanna do and not just blend in with the rest of your environment. So, having ADHD is hard.
Yeah. I think the phones, like, I think the hill that I'm going to die on is that phones are not helpful for people with ADHD. I think as much as we want them to be helpful,
Mhm,
because you want to remove as much friction as possible in order to make the habits easier, in order to make the routine stick. I think there's so much irrelevant stimuli that comes from your phone that you're constantly having to filter out that if you
mhm,
want to pay attention to something, it cannot be on your phone because like it's just too much to be able to filter out. So like I said, I think the key with ADHD, as much as we hate the idea of adding more friction, is sometimes adding friction. Maybe that's not
mhm,
always true, but I think when you're trying to form a new habit, it is true.
mhm. I do agree. I think there can be helpful things like push notifications or things like setting reminders so it pop up. But like you said, as soon as you pick up your phone, you're getting distracted by other things. I have a meditation app, and way back when I set a reminder every day at 9:12 a.m. I was going to meditate. So every day at 9:12 a.m. I get a notification and I'm either doing something and that time doesn't work anymore, so it's like an irrelevant thing. But sometimes people do need that reminder of like, hey, I'm an app on like your fifth page on your phone. Don't forget about me. I exist. But we're constantly getting so many notifications throughout the day that it isn't super helpful. And I did the same thing when starting this. I had something at 6 p.m. My watch reminds me, it's like, hey, did you journal today? But at 6 p.m., I'm eating dinner or I'm doing something else, or it's just like, when is the right time to do some of these things? So I found when doing this, like having things right next to my bed is like a helpful reminder and a way to like remind myself as it's right there, I can see it. And same thing with turning out my lights, having my habit tracker be right there. I sometimes would find myself looking at it and be like, you know what? I'm going to spend probably 15 minutes on my phone before I go to bed. I should just set a timer and just clean and like put a star for my 15 minutes of tidy. Or I can journal really quick. And it was sometimes a nice reminder of be like, okay, yeah, I should just do this. And then I get a star, then I'll feel good about it. And it was something that I was like, okay, that's quick. Kind of going back to James Clear and his like 2 minute rule, where I said, okay, I can just start journaling and see where I stop. And it was a nice way to keep going. I did find myself feeling a bit restrictive with some of the goals I set for myself. So
Really?
speaking about, yeah, when it came to the 64 ounces of water, 30 minutes of reading in the gym, those three specifically, because there are some days where I would either go for a really long walk or I would go play pickleball with friends. But since I wasn't at the gym, I couldn't put a star. Even though I was sweating, I felt like I was working out, but I put gym, and in my head I knew I wanted to go to the gym because I want to use my gym membership that I pay for. But since I wasn't at the gym, I didn't get a star. There's some days I would read, but I wouldn't time it. And I was like, I read a lot, but it probably wasn't actually 30 minutes, so I don't get a star. Or I drank a decent amount of water, but it wasn't 64 ounces. So it was like, it kind of goes back to maybe setting too high of goals, but I think in this case, I was just being very critical and I was like, you didn't do exactly what you wrote down, so you don't get a star. So that
Right.
was interesting.
Well, it goes back to figuring out what you want the outcome to be. Because if you want the
Uh-huh.
outcome to be active, maybe it's rephrasing it to be active for 30 minutes a day.
Uh-huh.
I struggled with the water thing too when you're doing 75 hard, where I would be like, I'm literally 2 ounces away from
Uh-huh.
1 gallon. But like, I don't have anything that is 2 ounces. So I just have to eyeball drinking 2 ounces, which is like 2 ounces is like a shot glass, right? Like it's such
Yeah.
a small amount of water. And I'd be like, it's so dumb. Like, why does it have to be such a hard line
Uh-huh.
at 128
Yeah.
ounces? So it sounds like that's kind of where you were feel like what you were feeling with
Uh-huh.
your goal, where you're like, okay, well, 64 ounces is the goal, but if I get 60 ounces, does it not mean I'm not hydrated? But I think sometimes we like to live in that gray area with ADHD,
Uh-huh.
and that's not helpful because it's the goal is there in order to help you reach it. And even if you don't get a star, it doesn't mean that you're not doing a good job. It just means
Yeah.
you still need to try and reach for that, because if you lower it to 60 ounces, then you might only get 50 and be like, oh, I'm close, and just constantly shrinking that goal for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you do some of that prep work at the beginning of like, okay, what do I want to achieve? What are my actual goals? Just something I struggle with. Like what do I want to do? And then what
Mhm.
steps do I need to do to actually get there? That part of like breaking it down is kind of tricky. But yeah, it's you can definitely get in the habit of shrinking your goals. Or in my sense, I think I was like, I'm never gonna hit 64 ounces of water. I'm not gonna drink any water. Like, it was like, if I can't do this, I'm just gonna, why even try? Which is not a good mentality to have. But that, I never put a sticker on 64 ounces of water when I was doing this. But something as simple as make my bed had like the most stickers in skincare. And it was like, it was very interesting. But I think thinking about the feedback that you can like actively see when doing your habit tracker was something that was very helpful for me because I could really reevaluate in the moment. Rather than beating myself up, I was like, okay, maybe what's standing in the way? Like, why can't I hit this amount of water? Or why can't I do XYZ thing? But that's where I feel like habit trackers can be sometimes harmful if you put so much worth on a star or a check mark or a streak that if you break that streak, then it's like, okay, what's the point? And people can get really discouraged and stop. That's how I feel with my Duolingo streak currently. I am almost about to hit 1,000, and I'm like, yeah, if I lose it, I don't think I ever want to do Duolingo again. But it brings you back to the app every day. It reminds you to keep going, motivates you, and there are definitely a lot of pros to doing a habit tracker, but it can be tricky.
Yeah. The all or nothing mindset, I feel like so many people get into, and I have seen like TikTok videos that kind of visualize that idea of being like, why ruin like if you skip a workout, why say like I'm swearing off of the gym, right? When that's like the
Mhm.
same as like, okay, you get like a dot of Sharpie on your shirt and then you just scribble all over the shirt with Sharpie. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no, right? Like the logical thing is to be like, oh, darn, I got a dot of Sharpie on my shirt. Maybe I'll try and get it out with
Mhm.
some stain remover, not being like, I need to now unload this entire Sharpie onto this shirt because
Tie-dye
it
the shirt.
I'm gonna tie dye this shirt because I might as well if I got
Yeah.
one dot of Sharpie on it.
Mhm.
But like that is how we think. That is how we think when it comes to things like drinking water, going to the gym, or eating healthy.
Mhm. James Clear talks about some of the mistakes that people run into with habit trackers, and his like only piece of advice is to never miss twice. He said like missing once is an accident, that's okay. Like something could happen, you could be sick, not feeling well, but if you miss twice, then now that's a new habit. The habit is now
Mm,
avoiding the thing that you put down. Like you said, I'm going to swear off the gym, I'm not going to go. And that's like that 2 day rule. You can miss one day, but not two.
yeah.
And I think so often it can be that harmful of, oh, I skipped this thing for one day, and that's enough to forget what happened the day prior of like, oh, we were doing this thing. And with my brain, I'm just like, oh, out of sight, out of mind. I forget that even is part of the things that I like to do or the habit that I've tried to start.
Do you feel like with your habit tracker that you were more consistent with these habits?
I do think so. I'm going to make another one, I think, for July and this like chunk of time. And I think there's some things I can take off of the habit tracker because they became a habit. Like making my bed was something I sometimes did, not always. When I had this, I'm like, okay, I want that star. I'm going to make my bed. But I feel like if I made 9 more habits, making my bed won't be on there because now that's something that I have done because my brain is like, okay, it takes 2 seconds, just make your bed. And I think I can take that off of my list. And same thing with like, I think maybe my skincare. I think it's not something I really need to work on. And I think that can come off. But there are probably some other things that I want to reevaluate. Like I said, like some of the 30 minutes, maybe I'll just put read. And if I read that day, then that's great. But I do think it helped me visualize the things. I think it can be very easy to think I've done something recently, but not actually. And that's like
Mhm.
one of the benefits of the habit tracker because especially I say the other day, and that could mean 2 years ago, or it could actually mean last week. And that's like going back to 75 hard, the progress photo every day. It's like, no, you need to visually see what is happening every day. And I think this was nice because I can look at it and be like, no, it has been 2 days since I last like picked up my book. So I do appreciate that. But I do think I need to think more about what's going to go on my next one in terms of like the habits, because I don't think I really formed any habits, if that makes sense. Like, I know habits take so long to form and it can be such a hard thing. I don't think that people with ADHD need to be like habitless. I don't think that's like the goal, but finding that good balance of like discipline, but also giving yourself grace. It, like you said, boils down to what do you actually want and what do you want that to look like for yourself?
Well, it does sound like you made some habits, right? Like making your bed every day and doing your
Hmm.
skincare consistently. And maybe it's not like what we dream of, this automatic habit. Like you still have to choose to do it, but maybe now
Hmm.
it just takes less spoons to
Hmm.
do that habit.
Hmm.
It's cool to see that you have made some change, and I think that's all we can hope for with ADHD is
Yeah.
just like make it so it's a little bit easier to do the things that you actually want to do.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think there's so many systems and rituals and stuff that we can do to have whatever, thing we desire. I think when thinking about like the 15 minutes of tidiness, the days I did do that, I did feel better. Like I woke up better. I was like, wow, there's not all my stuff from yesterday everywhere. It just kind of, we talked, maybe not on the podcast, but like the opening and closing shifts of
Mhm,
like, okay, what does morning me do versus night me do to set the next version of myself up for success? And I think there's so many little things of like, making my bed was similar to the, like, "Don't put it down, put it away," like,
mhm.
mantra that people live by, and it was like, "Okay, this is gonna take 2 seconds," or little things like that, and I think because of the 15 minutes of tidy, I was like, "Okay, I can limit how like, what that looks like or what I'm focusing on if every day I am putting things back where they're supposed to go or taking 2 seconds just to put something away." So, I think it's can be helpful in, like you said, reducing the, like, mental brain power that it takes to think about these things. When you do it consistently, I'm like, I can visualize how long something's gonna take. Whereas there are so many tasks that I've been putting off forever, and I'm like, "Oh, this is gonna take me months to do." Have you seen that girl on TikTok that does the
Yeah.
how long does it actually take? I need
Yeah.
her to come to my apartment. But it's so we build things up in our heads so much, and it's like I need to organize my Tupperware drawer, and I don't want to. I keep just putting things in there, and I close it, and I don't see it, and it doesn't bother me because I think it's gonna take me hours, but it probably would take me literally 15 minutes to take everything out and put it back how it's supposed to go. But why do we do that? Why do we build things up and then we never do them? Because we're afraid. Time will pass either way. So I need to do the thing.
It's
Eat the
true.
frog. Have you heard that?
Eat the frog?
Have you ever heard of eat the frog?
No.
It's helpful. Like, so when you're making lists, like to-do list, eat the frog is basically to do the thing you don't want to do the most and get that out of the way. That way all the little things will either be easier or you'll just get the ball rolling. So by eating the frog, you're choosing to do the thing you don't want to do first. So,
Gotcha. Eat the
yeah,
frog.
eat the frog.
Alright.
Because who wants to do that? No one. Sometimes you just got to. That's like the how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a
One
time.
bite at a time, but
Just
a
throwing in all the
frog is just
metaphors.
one
Just,
mouthful, I think.
I guess. How many animal
How
metaphors can we
many
fit?
animal eating metaphors do we have? That's funny. PETA's probably
Well,
not happy with these.
no, not at all. Uh, well, looking into your future, what do you think habits will look like for you?
I think I need to figure out a different method. I might just go to doing something in my notes app. I think I have the most success when I don't think of my habits as habits, kind of like what I was saying. I think I have to
Mhm,
think of it as a to-do list and then
mhm,
it'll get done. But if I think of it as things that I may get done along the way of my day. They aren't gonna accidentally get done. They are
mhm,
things that I need to choose to do, and for me, that sounds more like a to-do list rather than a habit tracker. So I think that
mhm,
shift in mindset is much better for me because when I was doing 75 hard, I was so much more successful by waking up each day going, these are the things I need to do, and I, like, started doing those things from the moment that I woke up. So,
mhm.
I think I need to think of it more like that and figure out what exactly it is that I want to get out of my day. But I've also just been really, really busy lately. So I
Yeah.
think I've been struggling with the idea of giving myself grace and flexibility, but also trying to build habits because it feels
Mhm.
like the habit is deteriorating because when I was doing 75 hard, I was doing it so consistently and at the detriment of my sleep and my energy. But
Mhm.
now that I'm making a choice to sometimes not do those habits so that I can get a little bit of extra sleep or I'm not super stressed, it feels like I'm going backwards. But I know that's not necessarily true. It's,
Mhm.
I think I'm just having trouble figuring out what direction I want to grow in and what direction I
Yeah.
want to improve in when there's just so many things like
There's so many things you wanna
getting
be good at.
oh my gosh, I remember my last habit. Getting enough sleep was on my list. Oh my gosh. That I okay. Getting enough sleep was on my thing, and that's why I didn't remember it because my phone automatically tracks that for me. So
Yeah.
again, the unconscious thing is not helpful, but that was a challenge, right? I
Mhm.
was like, "Okay, well, I'm not getting enough sleep, so I'm not gonna get my sleep tracker star, but
Yeah.
also if I sleep in, then I'm not gonna go to the gym, and I don't
Mhm.
have time today to go later," so if it threw off my
Yeah.
whole thing. So
Mhm.
it felt like one thing was sacrificing the other and just was really struggling with that.
Yeah, I the, like, snowball effect of that is exactly how my brain was working too, because in order to go to the gym, I have to go in the morning, but in order to
Mhm.
go in the morning, I have to get enough sleep, but in order to get enough sleep, I have to sacrifice hanging out with friends or doing, like, other commitments that I have. Because I know I'm not gonna go to the gym in, like, the evening or the afternoon. So, it is funny how all of those things kind of like the domino effect of how habits work. But with your to-do list, what prevents you from leaving things unchecked? Because I think with my to-do list, I have so many things, I'm like, "Well, looks like I'm not gonna do that," and I just like, it's not, like, official when I write things down. It's like, "Maybe I'll do this," but for you, it seems definitely, like, more finite, like, what's on this list is getting done no matter what.
Yeah. I I have inner demons that want me to complete my checklist. I don't know, just I guess that's just my personality type is
Mhm,
that when I am thinking of something, like, I will do it.
mhm,
I think what where I fail is if I am not thinking of it and aware of it. So,
mhm.
when I was doing 75 hard, days that I went to bed without checking my checklist was when I would miss something.
That's so interesting. I find so many, like, notes all the time, whether it's, like, to-do lists, like, actual, like, templates that I have, and there's so many things that aren't crossed off, and I literally have to remember, like, I wonder if I ever did that. I wonder if past me ever did this thing. But I think if I don't write things down, I'm going to forget them in some capacities, whether that's a sticky note, putting it in my phone. So sometimes it's easier just to take that second to do things now. I don't know about you, but I do this often, like, with text or with emails, like, I'm gonna just do it in the moment versus putting things off. Like, I know some people have very strict boundaries of, like, "Okay, if I get something after 5 PM, I'm not gonna look at it," and I'm like, I actually don't care if it's, like, 11 PM and I get an email and I'm awake, I'll either schedule send it for the next day, but I need to, like, do it right now or else I'm gonna, like, forget what I wanna say, or it's just not gonna exist, or I'll think I've responded because I've already given it the mental energy of thinking about it.
Yeah,
But
I I have been that way with work, and that's why I've had to it wasn't helpful for me to respond to things outside of hours because then I
Mhm.
just constantly felt like I didn't have enough energy because I was constantly thinking about things, like, my brain could
Yeah.
never rest. So it was just about making sure that I didn't receive those notifications, that
Mhm.
the first time that I saw it, I
Yeah.
was
Mhm.
prepared to act on it.
Yeah.
So it was just about changing up my systems.
Yeah. Taking this step back, if you don't know that you have to do something, you're not gonna think about it, and then you're not gonna do it.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Brainworms and Tangents. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and be sure to subscribe. We'll be back for a new episode every Wednesday. Bye.
Bye.